All right, good evening, everybody. This is a meeting on June 23rd, 2026 of the Emergency Services Grant Program Advisory Committee. This meeting is going to be a brief meeting just to wrap up the spring search and rescue grants. Oh, there's Lynette. Okay. Didn't think she was going to join us. This is search and rescue grant round and look ahead briefly to the fall. Okay, hi Lynette. Glad you got you in here. It was a little struggle to get everybody on, but I think we're good now. We just started the meeting and welcome everyone. Let me quickly get the slide deck up here. I'm so amazed that all of you are on. I thought for sure this would be tough to find people in between their adventures. So Jody, I was hoping for a slideshow of your trip to Croatia. You'll have to show us in the fall.
Yeah, I'll bring it next time for sure.
Great. So real quickly, just like we've done after other rounds, we're just going to recap quickly kind of what worked, what didn't work, and what could be improved. And I did hear a number of you say when we met in person that this round felt easier, but also because there were only 9 applications versus 20 that we had last fall. And so what I want to kind of try to pick out tonight is whether it is a matter of volume or if our questions are getting easier to evaluate. I know it's hard to think back even 2 months ago. That's like, feels like 2 years ago. But if there's anything that you feel, now we did do a debrief after the fall round and I made some notes from that. But again, I just kind of want to check in and see, is the workload too much for you? Should we try to break it up somehow as we go into a much more, we're probably going to start getting 20 to 22 applications for the fall round on a regular basis. I think now that the fire districts are kind of in the rhythm of applying, we're going to see them applying every year. So anyone have thoughts on kind of the time crunch that it's putting you under?
It's Jody. I'm probably the only one who feels this way because I still consider myself a newbie, even though I've gone through one full cycle. But fall is always hard for me just because I'm less familiar with some of the organizations than the rest of you. And then also just because the quantity is so much and it takes longer for me to comprehend since they are slightly less familiar to me. But I'm probably the only one because spring is a breeze.
Okay, well, that's good, really good feedback because I don't think you're alone in that. I mean, yours is kind of an interesting position that you represent the recreation field. So I know you're not as integrated into the fire fighting and community as some others are, but I still think we are learning who needs what and how much to give out. What do you think could help with that, Jody? I wonder if
Yeah, that's a good question.
I mean, I
Someone
wonder
sharing
if
their brain with me.
yeah. Well,
Yeah,
if we
I mean,
could,
I think dividing it up maybe
that's what
into
I was thinking. Yeah, go
2
ahead.
groups, but that might be hard because when you're in the rhythm and you're trying to prioritize which ones, you can't but help compare one against the other. That might hinder people in their rating score. I'm not sure, but it's a lot to do in a 1 week,
Yeah.
ish period of time. Maybe dividing it up in half might make sense. And then obviously we haven't been able to get through all of the feedback when we meet in person either, just because there are so many and there is so much conversation going on. We should almost probably always assume it's going to probably be a two person or a 2-time meeting. Yeah.
No, go ahead, Cynthia. I think those are really good thoughts to think on how we could split it up.
Is it, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Is it possible if we have a little longer period to rate?
Yeah, I mean, I
Can
already
we
give you
stretch that out?
I give you 10 days. And if that's not enough, we can certainly extend that. I know some people though don't start scoring until later anyway. Although some of you got them in right away this time. You were on it. But that is, I mean, does that help or does that just make it drag on longer? Because sometimes I know people like to just go in, spend the 3 hours or whatever, look at them all at once. And some people want to do a couple, go back, do a couple. So I think it's kind of depends on your style of how to best rank them. The other thing, I mean, we could do is look at the application questions and just, or the scoring questions and just consider cutting those back so that you're not looking through 6 or 7 questions per application, because that gets cumbersome.
Barb,
Yeah.
for me, I guess my input on it is, 9 is easy, 22 is more. That just is twice as much work, but that's okay. I mean, if that's what it is, that's what it is. Having now done it for a little bit, practice has just made me quicker at it. So, that's better. I will admit that half the questions I just kind of check the box on. And
Okay,
I don't
that's good to
really,
know.
I mean, I think that they're probably important that they're there, but I don't spend a lot of time on those. The important ones, I wouldn't want to cut out, but
Okay.
the other ones really don't take me much time anyway. So I wouldn't reduce the number of questions, or I don't know that reducing the number of questions would really save me any time.
And just understanding that some people like yourself, and I would do the same, is I'm just really going to look at those important questions and take the time to rank those, and the others are kind of simple yes or no or move on.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
I mean, I read them, but I don't spend I don't need to spend a lot of time on some of those. On half of them, they're just quick. You're just making sure that they say something good.
That sounds good. I do know of 2 other grant programs at the county where they just split the, does somebody have their hand up? Please go ahead if you do. They split the number in half, or we don't really have tiers. I was trying to think if there's a way to rank, like, we could do, I mean, most of the fire districts are around the same. It's not like there's some that are obviously more funded and that kind of thing, but I don't know if it makes sense to put, Mountain View and Sugarloaf and 4 Mile and, the cities in one group and have a group evaluate them, and then maybe the smaller rural ones. I know that you all have such good insight, Cynthia.
What if we did it in terms of the money they're asking? So if they're asking for a certain amount of money, because we only have a so large pool, so then the more applicants, and especially when you have some of the big guys coming in asking for a lot of money, and some of these stations asking for a lot of money, which they have in the past. And I'm just kind of trying to think of more a way to dissect some of this, because I know when I see those big amounts, I'm always
That's
like,
not apples to
wow.
apples.
And then I
Yeah.
just set them aside, where I'm like, I'm not even going to think about you and what you're asking, because it's either such a large amount or there's so many details that I just want to like start with those who've never asked us, or they're asking for a small amount, and then kind of pick that apart before I'm going to look at somebody who's like, I'd like 400 of the 500,000 you have. So I don't know
I think
if
we'd have to set that expectation in some way before we send out the applications.
I don't even mean for them. I mean for our internal process.
True,
just
but
kind of looking
so
at
you're
stuff
saying
like,
that some would look at the more expensive ones and some would look at the,
or just like we did at this last meeting where we looked at these smaller amounts that were reasonable and then came back to the larger ones to say, okay, what's reasonable of this? What are we going to have left? I think we went, a long way toward trying to help ES and RMR by, just despite some of the large amounts these folks are asking. I was formulating this question as I was saying it. So if it doesn't make sense, or if it's not, going to help us logistically, but I'm just trying to think of a way, not even in the rating process, but just how to shape my brain around 21 requests or whatever.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm like, all right, let's just put these big guys away and then look at these smaller things, because they're really not asking for very much. Tiny little amounts don't add up to that much, as we saw from the spring round, and then these larger amounts. So I don't know if that helps.
Okay, let me have, it looks like Harry wants to say something.
I mean, sort of along those lines, Cynthia, I mean, I would like to put expectations out ahead of time, and the rest of the group may feel differently about this, and that would be fine. But I really would prefer that we tell everybody, here's how much money there is. There's 22, 22 people, 22 groups applying for it. That comes out to 50,000 each. That will probably, that will be the average number. So, because I don't like getting those ones for 400,000. I resent that they ask for so much, and I know they're not doing it on purpose, but it always feels greedy to me, even though they have no idea.
Right, they don't know what the other.
Yeah, I didn't know if we could do what you're suggesting. I didn't know if we could say, this is what we're working with, folks. So like, I don't know, think about all the other stations that exist.
Let me have Lynette goes.
Is there a reason you couldn't say we typically get 22 grants?
Yeah, we did that this last time. We said the average.
What they can or can't apply for, but
yeah,
the average grant would then be about 50,000. That might get people thinking, the big ones sort of reducing their ask, and the little ones saying, hey, I could ask for more than $10,000.
We did give them a sense of the average. I don't think it
didn't change anything. Oh, well.
I think the ones that wanted big capital were going to ask for big capital, and there was no way.
Okay.
But we can talk about refining that. I'm just trying to say that we tried the soft touch, not such great results. So we might have to look at it a little bit more with some guardrails on. Lynette, do you want to go?
So I'm sitting in an ethical legal class for my licensure stuff. I personally don't think we should say out loud up front saying there's only average of 50,000 to just get those bigger asks to not apply, or to like temper that a little bit. People are going to apply for what they're going to apply for, and this tax, they should be able to. I think our role is to look at it and say what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. I do think that we could say something like, if you have a big ask, and we do, like, what can you chop, what is appropriate if we can only give out a certain amount of money, because there are a lot of rural areas that this is all they get their funding from, or whatever, however we want to say that. I think as a taxpayer, I think I sort of feel like, let them apply. But we could, we definitely sit with that, but I don't know. I personally don't feel like we should tell people up front, or just that, you just might get 50 grand, or, you know what I mean? Like, I hear where that's coming from for sure. I think they're going to do what they're going to do because there's no rule saying they can't. So just working within that.
And we had toyed. Yeah, one of the early suggestions, really before the committee was even formed, was to make it simple and just divide it and send that money out every year. And there's a small camp that thinks we should do that.
That would make it simple.
It would make it simple.
Here's $50,000 for you,
but not as accountable. Go ahead, Rick. Yeah, exactly.
However, so we I just will always, stand up for the rural mountain areas, and they just might need more.
Lynette, Harry, this is the path I've been down recently. I've been looking at the original chart, why this original funding, this tax was put into place, and the 5 groups it meant to represent. And just now I went to the Boulder County website for this team, for this group, and it talks about how the funding is to support underfunded and under-resourced organizations, such as blah, 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 serving Boulder County's rural and mountain communities. And I'm deeply concerned that we've moved away from that as cities, large budget organizations, and other groups continue to ask for more and more. I see them asking as if it's part of just one funding stream for their sizable budgets. And it makes me very uncomfortable to be in a position, in that position of having to say to the city of Boulder, the city of Lafayette, to talk about the 911 system, to talk about the cameras that are funded by this. We know that, the fund was originally created to fund, an RMR capital building fund, and that's great. So a big chunk is, immediately taken out of the money for them. And then money, of course, is given to the sheriff's office for the work they do. And then both of those organizations have come back for more and more and more for budget items, things that should be in their budget. And if it's not, I'm not here to talk about, are they well managed? Are they not well managed? Are they getting underfunded because of a reduced tax base? But their snack budgets are, less than some mountain departments' total budget. And it's just I have a real hard time with this. And I know I've kind of been the advocate for the underdog, but it's becoming more and more challenging to see more and more million dollar asks for things that should be part of a much different funding source.
With a much larger tax base. Yeah. And I think what's a combination of what Harry and Lynette and Rick said, without guiding them to, hey, you could ask for 50,000, but maybe something in that language of like, the pool for grant requests is limited. Please be aware that we will review, or, we will consider past requests that have been received. And also, that there are numerous rural and mountain fire departments and or agencies that this tax was set aside for. I mean, I don't know, but just as a way to kind of, we can't tell you what to ask for. We can't tell you, please don't ask for the, 9/10 of the budget, but we can say, this is a limited pool. We will be, the group will be looking at past requests and amounts that you've received as we're factoring in our decisions.
We do that. Yeah, that's part of it. The eligibility guidelines I put together are very clear on this is how you will be considered. So one of the things I'm hearing is maybe cities and large orgs get taken out of the mix early on, and one thing I think you have been doing is you've been fully funding the underserved requests. So maybe, Rick, the problem is those underserved agencies are not asking enough for what they could be, because I feel like those things, so I'm going to move you in 1 second, Lynette. I feel like you as a committee have sort of naturally only funded Boulder, Lafayette, the sheriff's office, because there was money left on the table after you went through Sunshine, Sugarloaf, Gold Hill. But you could prioritize those in the beginning and then not even consider the others until you feel you have fully fleshed out the needs for the underserved communities. Because I am concerned that because we had such a big pool, we could have a smaller pool this time and fewer applications, less money asked for. Okay, Lynette and then Harry.
So I'm curious if we could kind of really emphasize that language about that this tax was truly passed for some of the more underfunded rural agencies. It's not making up anything. Rick was able to find it on the website, just kind of
it is in all my communications. I do.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I think, they're gonna, because they're all looking for money, right? And they're gonna apply just thinking if they can. I think as a kudos to this team, we definitely have been, I think, looking at those underfunded rural areas. But yeah, that was just a thought. I didn't know.
Yeah. I mean, I've gone over this with the commissioners in terms of whether we exclude under a non, a city or like a Mountain View. There's not a whole big appetite to say they can't apply. So, but I do think that there's ways to address when they do apply. Harry and then Rick.
So, Rick, I really like prioritizing the underdogs and the underserved. I feel that's important. I also think that, again, unless I don't think, sorry, I don't think anybody out there is applying maliciously in any shape or form. But unless they really know what the numbers are, big groups apply for big dollars, little groups apply for little dollars. That's just sort of the way it is. So I really, I don't know that it's possible, but I really kind of feel like we have to give them guidance on what a reasonable number is, or there's no way that they would know.
I would say on the fire district side, that's not necessarily true, Harry. The bigger requests have been from hygiene, they've been from sunshine. They haven't been, Mountain View was like the smallest the year it applied. So the big amounts are coming from like Indian Peaks last year probably got a really big amount. Some of the smaller agencies are actually asking for pretty big amounts. So it's not like, I think that would be a huge red flag if the better funded ones were the ones asking for the big amounts and the smaller were asking small, but we're not, we're not seeing that. What we're seeing though is big agencies asking for something. And what I'm hearing is that we're not sure that's appropriate at all. Like maybe they shouldn't be using this fund at all. Right, Rick? Is that what you're?
Yeah, I in past year, so some of the lesser funded mountain agencies and rural agencies have been bootstrapping for so long and working with hand-me-downs that they sometimes don't even ask for what they need. And I remember us going back to, was it Indian Peaks or Ward, and saying,
Hey, more.
are you sure you don't need something? And I think that's a really healthy approach, is to, actively say to these agencies that could really benefit. I mean, they have so many calls, really serious calls, and are under-equipped that, helping them know what they need. I mean, BCFFA helps a little bit in saying, well, here's what everyone needs. But, I think there's an opportunity to go back to the original intent of the funding.
We could definitely focus on that.
Hey, they're Boulder County. They deserve to be heard and possibly funded. But my step back is always with, is this part of your regular budget? Did you plan for this? How are you going to fund this? Because we know that there's things that's going to affect everyone. The radio changeover is affecting people. The new automated dispatch. These are all things that are going to cost money to everybody to implement. And, one of the things that I saw in the original writings about this fund was, training and greater wildland firefighters. I mean, I think there's things in the original language of what they wanted to fund that people voted for as is a great guidance for us.
Very good. Cynthia?
Yeah, that's what I remember that ballot language. That's what I voted for, because I thought about the mountains. Of course, I live in Ward. I know that we're on a duct tape budget up here, and that Gold Hill isn't too far behind that in Jamestown. And so, I understand, like, on a personal level, that these guys just get by, and they've been doing that for decades. And they do have a lot of very serious calls. So it was really helpful. And it was Ward where you guys were like, you guys want the manual one? Can we get you an automatic? For dealing with car accidents and things.
Well, I do know that BCFFA has, in the beginning of this, had sort of taken over, like they were trying to direct how this money should go because they were instrumental in helping it get passed. But what I'm hearing from you as the committee is now that, you know, everybody's really well experienced in this, you've gone through 3 of each of the rounds, which is incredible. Thank you for those of you, and or 2 in some cases, but that's still commendable. And I'm hearing that you're feeling like the getting back to the basics of what the fund is for. I know that the counterpart to BCFFA is something called a consortium, and that's the better funded ones. And so, you know, we could kind of set those aside. Now, I have told the sheriff's office not to come back for asks, so I don't think we'll get the sheriff's office this fall. It's always a wild card if one of the cities comes in. So we've taken care of Lafayette, Louisville, Boulder. Longmont was in the search and rescue group. And Harry, just to put a fine point on what I said, in the search and rescue round, the bigger agencies came in with the big amounts. So we've got kind of an opposite situation in the fall. You know, we wrestle with BES and RMR in the spring, and then we have just so many applicants in the fall. So, I mean, this team, if you decide, this committee could say, you know, we're going to put a focus on the underserved mountain and rural communities, just like it says on the website, just like it said in the ballot language, and just be upfront about that. And see what we get if that. And maybe you all in your smaller communities can talk to people about go for it, you know? I mean, I'm not sure why one agency only asks for, you know, 12,000 something of something, and others aren't shy about asking for 150,000. Ben?
Yeah, just to that point, I think that there's a little bit of a systematic thing there in that these agencies that are asking for the smaller dollar amounts, that amount might be just thinking of it proportional to their budget. Like they buy $12,000 of equipment, they have to maintain that equipment, they have to train on it. And so they're like, if we buy more equipment, that's more of our man hours we have to put in to maintain this item. So they might ask for something for numbers sake that's proportional to 50% of their annual budget. And then you scale that to a larger, well-funded agency. And I think that's why the asks are at the scales that we're kind of seeing them. So like, I don't think that we need to see like Indian Peaks applying for 500K every time because they can't maintain 500K of trucks every single year if we keep giving that to them. You know, they realize that and they want to be sustainable. So there's this aspect of
so they're kind of as they're applying, they're looking at their own capacity to even work with what they're asking for. That's good. That's good to know.
And realistically, some of these groups might have, you know, only so many active volunteers. So in terms of managing their equipment and training with it, that just scales some of these asks in a way. So I don't know that there's like a way around that, but it's just kind of a fact, you know, like if helping out all the mountain agencies puts us at 100K less than the money we have to give, and then Mountain View asks for 100K and their budget is 100 million, like then it's harder to say no in that case. And I think that's a little bit of the situation that we've come into. And I agree with everything that's being said here, but I think that's just some of the systematic ways that we're trying to address this.
And I think this committee has done a phenomenal job. I want to give you all the credit that's due in making all of those different, you know, balancing all of those different things each time. I've always been impressed with where you come down to at the end because, you know, you're taking into account what have they asked for before, how big are they and can they handle that? You know, what could they possibly use more? One of the things that the Climate Equity Fund is looking at is whether they should take an agency's individual annual budget and not give more than that annual budget. And I don't know if that applies here, but they are looking at some sort of what do you call it? You know, looking at not giving too much to an agency that really can't manage it. But I feel like our fire districts are really good about not stepping over their ability to maintain. I don't know. I mean, I think you'd all know kind of if somebody was asking for too much. and they couldn't handle it. So again, kudos to the job you've done, because I think every round has come out, you know, in a way that has really balanced all those things very well. But Rick, I know you have that same concern each time, and so if there's a way we can sort of let the underserved communities know, you know, they've got the first shot at the money.
Can we
I
put
mean,
that on
I
the,
love,
can we put that on the application? The literal language that's
Yeah,
on the
that's a good,
website,
yep,
right
I can
there?
do that.
And
Yep.
just note that, like, you know, per the ballot language, underserved and mountain
Yep.
and rural mountain communities will be given priority.
So if we do that, I mean, do we think that some of these bigger ones we'll just say, okay, I won't apply, or they'll
apply.
or they'll
I mean,
cut
I
that?
think they're
Or do you think
looking
that
for
they
us
just
to,
won't be as surprised when we turn them down?
that's a good point. I think if we, unless we give them specific instructions that they can't apply, they're going to weigh whether it's worth it or not to even throw their hat in. So, and I don't think we're at a point where the county wants to say they can't apply. So it does kind of fall on your shoulders, but we could be pretty clear that they're not the priority. Go ahead, Rick.
So I have been positively moved by those agencies that said, hey, you know, you pay for half the truck, we'll pay for half the truck. Or we don't need to fix the truck, we could just use the old chassis and do something smart. And those people who actually read the application, and on the one that says, don't tell us that you serve everybody, how do you really deal with this whole equity thing? The ones that actually read that and respond to it, I almost want to give them the money no matter what they ask for, because they're actually reading the application and following the directions. I realize that's where we come in. We're humans. We read this thing, we have an opinion, and then we advocate. But I continue to stick with those folks who are wanting to be part of a bigger solution for more departments, more agencies, and not just about, you know, checking a line item on their annual budget.
Go ahead, Cynthia.
I agree, and it feels like, you know, we have to score you on these questions, so you can skip it or give us a fluffy answer. This is going to affect your score. So, you know, and I'm not sure if they understand that, where it's like we're literally rating your answers. So if we're asking you questions and you leave it blank, that's good. You know, we're going to factor in the fact that you did not, you know, that was a non-answer, and obviously, you know, this isn't a test. We're just, you know, it's all nuance, but at the same time, I agree. When I see that, when I see somebody actually answer that question in a genuine way, because I don't think it's that hard to answer, but I think there's sort of been an old boy network in fire departments forever. So they're just kind of like, we serve everybody, and what's the problem? And it's like, there's a lot of ways you could tear that question apart and talk about the people that are you're recruiting into your fire department, you know, individual things that you're serving, those night out things that you do, you know, instructions that are in Spanish. I mean, it's really not that hard, but I've been impressed every single time someone's answered that question, because they're not just blowing it off going, you know, we serve everyone. They're actually taking it seriously, that you are reaching out to a professional board and to a county agency for tax dollars, and you're having enough responsibility to read this grant. I've helped apply for grants for ward before, and I'm reading every single little detail, and I want to answer every single thing just to raise my ability. So when I see people fluff it, I'm like, you're asking for money. You're asking for a lot of money. So put a little effort into this, you know, take more than a day to work on that application.
Yeah, and I don't know how many people answering that question. Well, one, I mean, somebody gets assigned to do the grant. So we're talking about one person having to represent the whole agency, and that's probably tough depending on who it's been assigned to. I also wonder if maybe kind of having a pre-meeting for applicants might be beneficial, that they can come and ask questions, and we can, you don't have to be involved in this, but the county could kind of give them some guidance of what you just said, Cynthia, which is all of these questions are very important. We look at them closely. I mean, I assume people know that we're not just throwing out a bunch of questions and only looking at one or two, that everybody's reading everything. But you know, maybe that's a wrong assumption. So I looked back at what you all came up with after the fall. It looks like we didn't really look at the scoring questions. I can bring those back in August before we launch. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if that might help, and maybe we can say, you know, you're welcome to apply for what you need. And if the budget can't sustain it for one round, we can look at partially funding. We've been doing that. We could look at asking you to come back the next time, and you know, but that's where I think it gets hard when you're dealing with 20 applications, is telling one, we can't pay for your full truck because we don't have enough money. That's the piece I'm trying to get around in terms of all of you having to get into the nitty gritty on all of the applications. It's
Barb,
fine if they all fit in, but the budget.
Does that create a lot more work for you to have a meeting for the applicants?
No, not
seeing
at
as
all.
you're holding all of this together. So as much as this board's awesome, you know, you are the working memory for this board who is remembering, you know, and keeping these documents. And as someone who's prepared packets before, I'm like, answer the questions. I have to write them.
No, and I
so
think getting out
if
early, yeah,
if they
doing that
overlook
early.
it, but is that something that's going to add a whole lot of labor for you guys on your end to have a pre-meet for applicants so they can kind of understand this board? And some of these folks have worked together for a few years, and as we're kind of,
Right.
you know, I mean, I think
it's
some of them,
time. Yeah.
I think some
I
of
mean, we
them
did
didn't ask
listening
for a lot.
Yeah, we did listening sessions ahead of this, but it's time we go back, and it could be two-way conversation about what do they see on their end. They might be completely confused by the process and they don't want to tell us because they're afraid we'll nick their amounts of, you know. So I think it'd be helpful, and I'd be happy to do those. Rick?
I think part of this is sharing with them those things we like. Like, we've received applications that said, here's my priorities. If I don't get anything, I have 5 priorities. Number 1 is this, number 2 is that, number 3. If I can't get it all, please just number 1 or just 1 and 2. Or, I mean, I don't want to speak for the whole group, but I think there's things that we've gotten on applications that really work. I've said some of them already. The idea of people, you know, not going for the most expensive or not asking for the world, you know, wanting to be part of a community. So yeah, if there was going to be a public information session of some kind, I think helping them know what works and what will, you know, motivate this team to advocate for them might be worthwhile.
Yeah, I could certainly try it and see who shows up and what kind of feedback we get. I know I felt bad for RMR because they did such an amazing job of prioritizing, but they just asked for too much money. And I told their grant writer that. I said it wasn't that you prioritize things, because I think she felt like if she hadn't prioritized things, she might have gotten more. And I said, no, that really helped. The committee had to cut back on your request. It was just too large. But knowing kind of where the priorities lay was helpful. Cynthia?
Just to piggyback on what Rick said and what you just said, you know, when I was guiding applicants in Netherlands, I would tell them, say, like, Board of Zoning Adjustment, they're gonna, you know, they want to have a zoning rule that's especially to their situation. So I would tell people, because I was prepping them individually, hey, this was a model BZA application that I got. Let me tell you how it was done. This is where I think, because they're just submitting these applications to us, and then we get to see whatever they've come up with. But this is where that pre-meet could be really helpful to them, of like, what do we like? What do we want to see? Because I know that there were some applicants who were like, yeah, whatever's the deal, just do whatever. I've got such a great idea, I'm gonna sell it. And other people were like, I hear what you're saying. And then they just followed, you know, my pseudo instructions of like, here's the things I see work, here's what the board likes, these are the kind of things you know, that you want to be thinking about. These are the impacts the neighbors are going to talk to you about. So I would just kind of give, you know, grease the wheels for them and then be like, turn it loose. You know, I'm trying to help you, but it's, you know, it wasn't my job for your application to get approved or not. It was just, here's what you can do. And that really helps folks to understand, because I think, I'm not sure who said it was Rick or Harry, but they don't know what to accept and maybe, or what to ask, and maybe they don't want to say that because that, you know, they think that we would judge them or something like that. So it's like,
Yeah, I mean, I
hey,
think
not
it's,
not
I think
everyone
the,
has a grant writing committee or you know, funding.
yeah, right. And you take that into account too. You know, not everyone has a professional grant writer. I think the counter to that is, I would say to them, tell us what you need versus us telling them what we'd like to get from them. I don't, I don't know that we've just determined what we like to fund. We end up funding a ton of radios. We end up funding vehicles. But that's because that's what people have been asking for. And that's because those are, I know, you know, kind of behind the scenes, people love to ask for new trucks and new stuff. And that's a tough one because some of those are very expensive items. So if I say, you know, we want to hear from you if you need new trucks, but then we get three, you know, truck requests for $300,000 trucks from 10 agencies, we're already over budget. So,
But like what Rick had said about, I like these agencies that are coming in, or it was Rick or Harry who was like, hey, we're going to pay half. And then, you know,
did I hear
we're
that
coming to you
that
for
you
the other
favor
half.
that? Okay.
And I don't know
Versus,
if, I
or
don't know
were
if
you
we can
saying that you
express
think they
them.
should just ask for the whole thing? Maybe I misunderstood that. Rick, when or Harry, when you made that point
No, that was,
about when they asked for half, whether they should have asked for the whole, is that what you were saying?
No, I think it's a fiscal responsibility and partnership to say,
Yeah.
hey, you do a little, I'll do a little, together we'll get this done. I mean,
Okay.
Gold Hill is super excited. They have their first new truck ever. All the other trucks are from the 70s and are hand-me-downs of hand-me-downs and hand-me-downs.
God,
And
look
the
at how much
chief
I've
and
aged
that
since the
truck,
70s.
I
Yeah.
mean, when the 4th of July parade happens and that truck goes down the street, there's going to be a lot of beaming people because we actually have a working, functional fire truck that can go to our entire district, which we've never been able to do before. We've never been able to cover our area because we didn't have a vehicle that could access a lot of the forest lands.
That's awesome. That's a great story.
We're
I'm
happy
happy to hear
about that
that.
too.
Take some photos. Go out there on July 4th, Rick, and I want some photos of that new truck.
I haven't done their 4th of July, but they throw a good party.
That sounds great. You know, and I do think there was talk initially, if I remember back with the commissioners, about two things that they really wanted to see. One is some level of collaboration, which we've struggled with because of the districts, the way they have their own boundaries, but also that idea of a shared responsibility, that they're putting something into it more than, you know, just paying the license or whatever, but there is you know, that shared. So, and if we're not shy about that, and we can say that, I think that, you know, that might go a long way to being able to fund the majority of what we get in terms of requests.
And that's what I'm saying about
I
like
think
shaping it, not so much like,
Jody?
here's what we want to see from you, but here are things that we've seen
Yeah.
on this board that, you know, impress the board, or
So
however we want to say that.
general sort of approaches. Yes.
And it all comes back, as Rick keeps mentioning, to like the initial ballot language and, you know, a lot of this initial stuff that we've kind of gotten far afield from, of just driving that back home. But then also things like, if there's questions on there, please answer them.
Yeah.
Please, you know, if you can do a little bit more for the equity question, then we help everybody. That goes a long way to the members of the board.
yeah. First off, I want to say you guys look like the Brady
Jim.
Bunch on my mobile phone right now. As I look
Oh,
at
how
the
funny.
squares as I'm walking to my location, you're all lined up like the Brady Bunch. And Harry, a moment ago, you pointed down at Rick when you said, no, it wasn't me that said this, it was Rick. And I was just laughing. Anyway.
I think that makes me Bobby Brady.
That's great. You're at the top.
I think
glad
that
that
makes
we're
you
of,
Alice.
Okay.
I'm glad. Oh, wow. I'm glad that we're almost all, with the exception of Ben, maybe in the age range that knows the Brady Bunch. No offense, Ben. It's a good thing. But what I was going to say is that what I'm hearing all of you say is essentially what we're looking to do is gather a list of best practices, right? And
Mhm.
this isn't a new thing for grant writing. This is a good practice for any business model, right? We always put together best practices for any category that we work in from a business standpoint. And whether that's things like we want to see collaboration amongst different organizations, or hey, we want you to take this inclusivity question that we ask you seriously, and it's
Mhm.
not that hard to say things beyond just hey, we service everyone in an emergency call, but hey, we have instructions in Spanish or this or that. I mean, or some of the other things we're talking about in terms of like fiscal accountability and responsibility and sharing the cost. I mean, these are just a handful of the things that I've heard you say, but you guys have all said more than that. I think if we put our heads together, we could come up with a collective, here's the best practices for how to fill out a grant that might make us a little bit more receptive to your ask. And if you're going to invest the time, Barb, in doing a pre-meet, then maybe doing the homework like that and consolidating that in a simple list might
Yep.
help guide that conversation a little bit.
I appreciate your summing that up, Jody, and I took notes. And go ahead, Harry. I'll go ahead and put that into a
So
list.
I agree with all that. I mean, better written applications are just good for everybody, and we should be encouraging them not just for what they're doing with us, but what they'll do with other committees in the future for different things. That said, correct me, please, if I'm wrong on this, but my sense of how we fund things is, with some exceptions, we always fund the small ones. We usually fund most of the middle ones. And the large ones, we always grumble and ratchet them back. But I don't know that, I mean, with some rare exceptions, we haven't thrown anybody out because we said, oh, boy, that was a terrible application. Or we didn't not fund them because of their application. So we need to do it, but I don't think we're practicing it right now. And it kind of gets us back to some of the beginning of this, which is, here's this pot of money. We do our best to distribute it. We're pretty good at spreading it around each session so that most of the time it's spent. And again, I kind of feel like we always fund the little ones. We usually fund the middle ones and we ratchet back the big ones. I just want to be better at that.
I'm listening. I had to turn off my camera because my internet connection's been going in and out. This is all really great feedback, and I feel like I have, unless somebody wants to add something, enough to pull together kind of a strategy on this. Sort of the best practices, as Jody said, maybe more some of the things that we say in these information meetings. I can also go to BCFFA meetings. I have done that, where we get good attendance because those agencies tend to show up. I think they meet monthly. And I think that there's many avenues that throughout this summer I can go ahead and sort of pass the word on that. So this is really, really great information. I don't think we solve the issue of making your jobs easier.
No, but I think we can
Did
take
I?
it back. I'm sorry, Barb, I thought you were done. It's hard when I'm on my mobile and can't see you all the time.
No, it's fine. And my connection is terrible for some reason. Go.
I was just going to say, I think we can take it back full circle to the first question that blew this conversation up, which is the workload too much? Is there something different that we can do? And we initially talked about this. Should we divide it? It sounds like we almost all go through the same process individually, and then we obviously go through that same process collectively, which is we tend to start with the smaller ones because we know that we can fund them. The middle ones mostly fund them, and then the large ones are the ones where we start giving things a haircut because their needs are excessive and we've run out of money by that point. So I wonder if, back to your first question, when it comes to how do we make the workload also more manageable, if we don't divide it up that way, which I think was maybe the initial suggestion of Cynthia, maybe, in terms of breaking it into tiers internally,
I didn't so much
not
say-
externally.
I didn't say tiers so much, but I think you're getting at it. I was just saying I didn't know if we as a group wanted to implement that procedure, but as you said, Jody, we seem to do that ourselves when we're doing the rating, and then when we come back in the group, just because we have to, because we only have a limited amount of funds. But I, just a way to try to dissect this, I only do that because it helps my brain, because I'm like, if you're asking for a ton of money, then we'll come back and see if you've earned it.
Well, and I do it because of it's efficient, right? Because in the end, when one of the questions is, do you suggest we fully fund them or partial funding? I can't normally answer that without understanding how much money we've already invested in some of these other ones. And that's why I leave them to the end, because I don't feel like I can fully fill out the report card, so to speak, until I have a more comprehensive view of what's on the table for all the other asks, which goes back to the initial purpose of this grant program in the first place, as we've all talked about. So,
Barb? Have we lost Barb?
She's
I
muted.
don't think we lost her. I think
Okay.
she's cutting in and out.
Yeah.
So
sorry, guys. This is all recording.
part of the language that was sent to the voters to pass this tax had 5 or 6 different groups: search and rescue, capital expenditures, and a few other things, rural and mountain departments. And have you gotten any feedback from the commissioners on how they're dividing it up? How much is going to search and rescue and how much is going to fire departments? And the only reason I ask that is, based on the volume of asks in each area. And I wasn't sure if there's been any discussion about, which side, which part of the year is getting how much of the money.
Is anybody hearing me at this point?
We are now.
Okay.
We can hear you.
Okay. So Rick, it was determined the last, I'd say 4 rounds, that $2 million goes to the fall and 500,000 goes to the search and rescue. And part of that was because that's what we anticipated the needs roughly to break out as. They would be open to altering that, but that seems about right. And we've always left it open that if search and rescue round needs more one year, you can dip into that 2 million. But like this year, you're moving over 120,000 from the spring to the fall. So they're going to have
Right.
2.6 something million.
Excellent. I just wanted to know if it had been considered or not. Cool. Great answer.
Okay. Yeah, no, it has. But again, open to interpretation if that balance isn't working out.
Hey, Barb.
Okay. Yeah.
Did we get to the agenda?
Not fully. I know we got 3 minutes left. The most important thing is, when are we going to meet at the Gold Hill Inn this summer for drinks and or hors d'oeuvres?
Rick?
You guys are welcome on my deck anytime. If the inn has music, so do I.
Oh, that's fantastic. We might take you up on that. All right, I'll send out a poll and see if there's any good nights to hang out on Rick's deck. And then the only other thing was looking at a timeline for the fall round, and what I heard somebody say is that you might want more time to look at applications. One thing we could do is look at how many applications we get, and if needed, extend the time that you have. So right now, and I hope my screen is showing with the calendar, we're looking at about 10 days in October for scoring. But that, if we get 20 applications again and people need more time, we can extend that. Should we just kind of leave this in place and then through email decide if that's enough time for you? I just usually like to use that October 27th is your official 4th Tuesday in the month, but all of this is movable as long as the committee agrees. So I just try to not take up more times on your calendar than you've already committed to, as much as possible. The other thing is we could start, instead of doing the reorganization in August, we could do it in July. But typically we've given you July off due to vacations and all. So unless I hear differently, we'll start with this. I'll put together a list of best practices and all, and I'll start setting up some public information meetings ahead of the August meeting. So that's the agenda, right at 7 o'clock. We can be adjourned if I hear somebody move to be adjourned. So move.
I so move.
Okay, second.
Second.
Sounds good. All right. Thank you all again for joining today. I'm going to work on my technology, and I'll be in touch via email, and I'll see you again in August, if not on Rick's deck prior to that.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks,
Happy summer.
everyone. Bye.
Happy summer.